authors panel for 2010. We've got a great are involved with a mystery novel. It's called Hidden Mickey. And you open up the front cover and it says, "Sometimes dead men do tell tales." Doesn't that sound intriguing? So first, we have Nancy Temple Rodrigue, who is one of the authors of Hidden Mickey. She's been an avid Disney fan since she was a little girl. She's been going to Disneyland since she was 6 years old. And she got really infatuated with the park, and there's a huge collection of stuff. We're going to have to hear about the collection, because, you know, they collect just a little bit. But she's been writing stories most of her life. She wrote her first novel back in 1989. With Tomorrowland as an influence, many of her stories are science fiction. I think you like Star Trek, it says. The Next Generation. So we'll hear a little bit about that. But she grew up in Modesto, lives with her husband Russ now, and they're in Lompoc. And she's going to tell you all about the Hidden Mickey storyline. And along with her is her co-author, well, that can't be. Will the real Dave Smith stand up? Now, you worked at Disneyland.
I did.
Back in the late 70s. So he has kind of an inner perspective on the park, and got inspired, has a strong connection, and I don't want to just go on and on. I want to let these folks talk so we have enough time to go to banquets. So why don't I first let each of you maybe talk a little bit about your involvement with Disney and your books, and we'll go in the same order.
Hi, I'm Nancy. This is Dave. As was introduced, I have been a long-time Disney fan, and Dave actually worked at Disneyland for quite a few years. Oh, it's not on? Has to start over? We met actually back in 1981 when Dave was a keelboat pilot. This was one of my favorite rides, and I hope they bring it back someday, please. But we became friends, and lost track.
They're laughing because they know someone who has the last keelboat.
Oh, are you here? Is she okay? I really miss the keelboats. They're an awesome ride. But we lost track of each other in 1985 when Dave quit working at the park. He got married and started moving, and I ended up getting married, and I moved elsewhere. And in 1999, through the power of the internet, I found him through a classmate website, and I wrote him, "Are you this, for who knew me back?" And he's going, "Yeah, I did. That was me." So we got reconnected, and around 2008, he called me. He says, "I have this idea. It's Walt Treasure." I just see him on the phone going, I go, "Okay." And he goes, "Who better to leave a treasure and clues than Walt, the world's greatest storyteller?" I go, that's awesome. So we started throwing around the ideas, and he said, "Do you want to help me write a novel?" And I was like, "Yeah." So, okay.
You didn't have to twist her arm.
Yeah, what else, So we started throwing ideas back and forth about, what could Walt possibly leave? Where would people go in a treasure hunt? So I started doing a lot of research, and, we both love Disneyland, so we have a lot of Disneyland in the book also. And the storyline is that Walt left behind a diary right before he died. Two friends find it when they're on a mouse adventure quest at the park in one of the spots that we'll never actually get into. But it starts leading clue after clue, and we touch on places that were important to Walt in his history. So I tried to end each chapter with the next clue. So those who are interested in figuring out things for themselves, where do you think that they need to go in the next clue? Now we're talking clues that are 40 years old. What are they going to find when they get there? So it was an interesting concept that we just really ran with. It's pretty thick book. We did the bulk of the writing in 2.5 months because the ideas just kept flowing between us. And what we think is very interesting in all this time, it's only on the phone and over the internet. We hadn't seen each other since 1985. So right before the book was ready to go to printing, we had a little conflict. You know, I was a long-time Disney aficionado at the park. He was a long-time cast member at the park. So we had a different idea on, you know, how we saw a few things. So I got on Amtrak and I met him down here, and when I got off the train, it's the first time I'd seen him since 1985, and we had written a novel together. So I thought that was kind of an interesting concept. We've had a lot of fun with the book. We've heard a lot of, you know, nice things from the people who've gotten into it. We actually just finished the sequel, Hidden Mickey 2. Now, a lot of people get the title confused with the Mickeys you find in the parks. They think it's the guidebook. Steve did a wonderful job on his Hidden Mickey books, but this is like a historical fiction, a mystery, action-adventure type actual novel. But we do have 3 Hidden Mickeys on the cover, a little bit of fun for people to try to find them. And the sequel picks up where the one left off, and it's going to printing now, and it should be out in hopefully a month and a half. We're looking for a September release, but I thought, you know, you'd like to see the cover and what we did with the new artwork. So I'll let Dave jump in here.
Well, I have a very deep history in this town. As Tom was saying, how we kind of have our lives sometimes predestined by where we turn and where we go. I grew up here in Garden Grove. My parents, my grandfather was the first mailman Garden Grove ever had. When Disneyland first opened, my father, actually a school teacher, worked on several of the rides and worked on the front gate. And so it was interesting because as a kid, we would ride our bikes down to the park because I lived right down the street. My mom is here and still lives in the same house down on West, right off West and Lamson. And we would ride our bikes down to the park and stand at the exit gate asking people leaving if they had any tickets they weren't going to keep. Until the security would come and, you know, ask us politely to move on. That was sort of my first, you know, exposure. We sort of took it for granted because we would ride our bikes and go down to the hotel and play Frisbee and do all kinds of neat stuff. And then, of course, in 1978, I was hired to work in the park on the canoes, keelboats, Pirates of the Caribbean, and later on the monorail. This idea of the book kind of stems from a real affectionate look at Walt through the eyes of people. The concept of a book about Disney is always interesting, but a book that details things in Disneyland that people see. I don't know about you, but I always like to read a book that centers on things I've been to or I've seen. And so when Nancy and I started really hashing out the outline for the book, we wanted it to be authentic. We used a tremendous amount of research from dozens of books. Dave Smith, who I got to meet today, my fellow and namesake here, and worked at the park at the same time he did. We used a lot of his books to get the ideas flowing and get the information of the research part done. So we wanted a very authentic historical fiction centered around, obviously, a fictional diary that Walt may or may not have left. We don't know. But it's a love story. It's an action-adventure mystery, as Nancy said. The interesting thing is when we've had a few people, when the book first came out last September, we actually had some adults come in and say, "Oh, that's nice, but I don't have any kids," thinking Disney book must be a kid's book. No, the whole idea was that this was an adult novel. It's age appropriate for 10 and up, but it was an adult level novel. Well, the funny thing is that because we wrote it as an adult novel, we really didn't think of the audience as being teenagers and whatnot. And I live in St. George, Utah. I don't know if any of you know where that is. It's just an hour and a half north of Las Vegas. And one of the high schools, one of the kids was reading the book, and the teacher kept telling him, "Put it away, put it away, put it away, put it away."
Matt? met
And finally, the teacher says, "What are you reading?" And so he loaned it to the teacher. The teacher just loved it. They bought a classroom set. They invited me to come and speak to their English department. It just sort of was a very interesting audience that we had never anticipated, but it makes total sense because I think all of us can relive our days of walking down Main Street and seeing things in the park. And so both these two books, the new book as well as the original Hidden Mickey that came out last year, are really an affectionate look at the things about Disney. And because I did work in the park, I wanted to have a little bit, just a touch of backstage, because I think all of us and a lot of people, when they go to the park, they wonder what is behind that door that says cast members only.
Which is what I was in, the position I was in, because I always, like to know the secrets. I like to know where the little things are hidden, and I like to know what's behind the doors. So that was a good blend of want to know and do know, and to try to blend it to make it interesting for the readers.
And so when people read this book, they just can't wait to go to the park and see I'm not going to give it away, the things that were trigger points or important points that gave them the answer to a clue. A lot like the book Da Vinci Code in the sense of historical, meaningful things. Obviously, I woke up one night with this idea in my head, who better, as Nancy said, who better than the greatest storyteller arguably in the world than to have had a story that Walt could have done to preserve his legacy. And that was the impetus and the drive of creating this book in such a way that people would really take into account and say, hey, I did not know that about Walt, or I did not know that existed, or whatever. Plus, there are many things like what Tom mentioned about the strike in 41 that we wanted to kind of bring, not in the second book, but that created an opportunity to kind of think what was Walt going through during that period of time. And so both books have just been absolutely fun to write, absolutely fun to hear the many, many reviews that we've received on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and various websites that are close. Our own website is hiddenmickeybook.com. But obviously, some of you may have some questions about it. So I know some of you have read it. In fact, we've had a couple of you come up and say that you have read it, and that's just a joy. And this is a very distinguished panel. I'm very honored to be at this table and to be here for the first time at a Disneyana Mania Convention to share this love of Disney that I have, and obviously that Nancy has too.
Well, Nancy and Dave, thank you so much for telling us about Hidden Mickey. We're running just a little late. I need to get them to a banquet in 20 minutes, but I don't want you guys to go before we have the opportunity to present each of you with an Arribas Brothers vase. It's got Disney Parks on one side, and it's got our club logo on the other, and we want each of you to take one home with you. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming to talk to us about your books.
Thank you for being here.
Chelsea, I just want to point you out. Will you raise your hand in the back? And I just want to have a big shout out to Chelsea, who's also the designer of the book.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right, gang. I've given you hopefully enough time to get changed for dinner, and we'll see you in a little bit at banquet.